That bourbon stain cost the Beckworth family their $3 billion empire. I know because I'm the one who made the call. The bourbon hit my dress blues at 13:47 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact time because checking my watch is something you do when you're a Marine. 24 years in the Corps teaches you to timestamp everything, especially when someone's about to make the biggest mistake of their life. My name is Marshall Thornfield. Most people call me Mac. I'm 49 years old, and I run Thornfield Defense Solutions. At that moment, standing in that conference center with bourbon soaking through my uniform, I was the only person in the room who could authorize $875 million to move from my accounts to theirs. Not $1 had transferred yet. That detail would matter more than anyone realized. The Defense Industry Summit was one of those events that looks impressive from the outside and feels like an expensive networking session once you're inside. Glass and steel architecture, red carpet treatment, 180 attendees who spent more energy managing their image than actually discussing defense contracts. Pentagon liaisons, retired generals, established contractors, ambitious newcomers, all orbiting around one company name that had dominated the headlines for weeks. Beckworth Industries. I'd been invited because Thornfield Defense Solutions was about to become their biggest partner. After 18 months of negotiations, presentations, and Pentagon reviews, we were finally ready to close the largest defense modernization contract in Beckworth's history. The paperwork was signed. The press releases were drafted. Raymond Beckworth had already given interviews to Defense Weekly about entering a new era of growth and innovation. But here's what most people in that room didn't understand about defense contracting. Signatures on paper aren't the same as money in motion. Until I made one specific phone call and said one specific word, that $875 million was still sitting in Thornfield's accounts, waiting. I don't make that call remotely. I don't make it early, and I sure as hell don't make it until I've seen enough to know exactly what kind of leadership I'm funding. 24 years in the Marines teaches you to read people under pressure, not what they say in prepared remarks or how they handle scripted presentations. Anyone can look competent when the teleprompter's running. You watch what they do when they think the outcome's already decided, when they believe they have all the leverage, when they assume nobody important is watching. That's when you see who they really are. I'd been at the summit for maybe 45 minutes. Same dress blues I'd worn to these events for 12 years running my company. Guest credential hanging from a lanyard, no entourage, no handlers, just me and a contract that was going to make Beckworth Industries very wealthy. I was standing near the coffee station, reviewing my notes for tomorrow's final presentation, when Austin Beckworth decided to change everything. Austin Beckworth, 28 years old, Vice President of Operations, Raymond's only son. The kind of guy who learned what authority looked like before he ever learned what authority cost. He had that particular walk you see in second-generation executives. Confident without having earned it yet. Entitled in a way that comes from never being told no in any room your family owns. He approached the coffee station where I was standing, and I could see him sizing me up before he said a word. The way he looked at my guest credential, then at my uniform, then back at my name tag. Like he was running some kind of mental calculation about who belonged where in his hierarchy. I'd seen that look before, usually right before somebody made a decision they'd regret. "Excuse me," he said, reaching past me for a coffee cup. But instead of taking the cup, his glass of bourbon premium stuff, probably 18-year-old single malt, came down in a slow, deliberate pour across the front of my dress blues. The amber liquid spread across my chest ribbons and soaked into the fabric while he stepped back and delivered his line loud enough for the nearby group to hear. Time for old soldiers to step aside, don't you think? The reaction was immediate. A few people laughed, nervous laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Others looked uncomfortable. A couple of younger executives exchanged glances like they'd just witnessed something they weren't sure how to process. But what caught my attention wasn't the laughter or the discomfort. It was the silence from the people who should have said something. I looked at Austin for exactly 3 seconds, not because I was deciding what to say. I wasn't going to say anything. I was conducting a tactical assessment. Reading his posture, his expression, the way he glanced around to confirm his audience. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't even spontaneous. This was a calculated demonstration of what he considered his position in that room versus mine. Then I looked across the space and saw Patricia Beckworth, Raymond's wife, standing about 15 feet away. She'd witnessed the entire incident. I know because she met my eyes for half a second when I looked her direction. Then she turned away and walked toward another cluster of guests, like she'd just watched someone drop a cocktail napkin. That deliberate turn, that studied indifference, told me everything I needed to know about the command structure in the Beckworth family. I didn't wipe the bourbon off my uniform. I didn't say a word to Austin or anyone else. I just stood there and let the room see exactly what had happened. Who did it? Who laughed? Who looked uncomfortable? And who made the conscious choice to pretend they hadn't seen anything at all? Standing there with bourbon soaking through my dress blues, I had one thought that would change everything for the Beckworth family. I haven't transferred a single dollar yet. Let me explain how defense contracting actually works, because understanding the mechanics is crucial for everything that happened next. When companies like Beckworth Industries announce major partnerships, when they give interviews to industry publications, when their stock prices jump on news of massive contracts, most people assume the money has already moved, that the deal is done. But that's not how it works, especially not in defense contracting, and definitely not when you're dealing with the kind of money we were discussing. Thornfield Defense Solutions had committed $875 million to Beckworth Industries for a comprehensive 5-year defense modernization program. The contracts were signed, the announcements were made, the champagne was ordered, but commitment and execution are two different animals entirely. The difference between a signed contract and executed funding comes down to one phone call, one word: execute. Until I say that word to my general counsel, those $875 million stay exactly where they are, and I don't say it remotely, I don't say it early, and I sure as hell don't say it until I've completed what the Marine Corps taught me to call a full situational assessment. I've had a clause written into every major contract I've signed for the past 8 years, Section 12.7, Conduct Unbecoming. It's borrowed language from the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it means exactly what it says. Any behavior by company leadership that materially impacts operational integrity triggers immediate withdrawal rights. No intent requirement, no warning period, no negotiation window, just cause and effect. I added that clause after an incident in Fallujah back in 2004. A young lieutenant, 24 years old, son of a Pentagon general, decided his family connections meant he didn't have to follow basic tactical protocols. His arrogance got 3 of my Marines killed in a convoy ambush that should never have happened. When the after-action report was filed, nothing happened to the lieutenant. His father made some calls, pulled some strings, and suddenly the investigation focused on equipment failures and communication breakdowns. Everything except the one factor that actually mattered: leadership failure. Those 3 Marines had families, kids, futures. All of it gone, because someone with inherited authority thought the rules didn't apply to him. I've carried their names with me for 20 years. Corporal James Rodriguez, Lance Corporal Michael Zhang, Private First Class Sarah Williams. I swore after their memorial service that I'd never again fund incompetence just because it came with the right last name. The Bourbon incident at the Defense Summit wasn't about disrespect. It was a field test. Austin Beckworth had just demonstrated exactly how his family's company operated when they thought they had leverage, when they believed the deal was already done. When they assumed nobody important was watching, he was wrong on all 3 counts. Later that evening, around 2:33 hours, my phone buzzed with a text message. Wesley Garrison, Beckworth's incoming CEO, scheduled to take over from Raymond within the next quarter. The message was short: "Hey, about earlier. That shouldn't have happened." I watched the typing indicator appear and disappear twice before he actually sent those words. Here was a man who was about to run a $3 billion defense company, who had stood in that conference center for 6 hours watching everything unfold, and his response was a 4-sentence text message delivered 9 hours after the fact. I wrote back, "Noted." Then I set the phone on my hotel room desk and spent the next hour reviewing every piece of intelligence I'd gathered about Beckworth Industries over the past 18 months. Financial reports, leadership assessments, operational reviews, background checks, all the data I'd collected before committing Thornfield's resources to their partnership. The numbers told one story. Beckworth Industries was financially solid, operationally efficient, strategically positioned for growth, a good investment by any reasonable measure. But numbers only capture part of the picture. The other part, the part that determines whether a company succeeds or fails under pressure, shows up in how leadership behaves when they think nobody's keeping score. Austin Beckworth thought nobody was keeping score. His mother thought nobody was keeping score. Wesley Garrison, who watched it all happen and said nothing for 9 hours, definitely thought nobody was keeping score. They were about to learn otherwise. The boardroom meeting was scheduled for 0800 the next morning. Final contract review, ceremonial handshakes, maybe some photos for the trade publications. Standard procedure for closing a deal this size. What wouldn't be standard was the live feed broadcasting everything to Beckworth's board of directors, their legal team, and their investor relations staff. Raymond had insisted on the cameras as a transparency measure. Something about good governance and stakeholder confidence. I thought it was perfect. Beckworth Industries occupied 4 floors of a glass tower in downtown DC. The kind of building that screams success without actually saying anything about competence. Their boardroom was on the 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac, conference table that could seat 20 people comfortably. Everything designed to impress visitors and make them feel like they were part of something important. I arrived at 0755, 5 minutes early, military habit. The room was already set up with cameras at 3 angles. Red indicator lights blinking in the corners, internal feed running live. 12 people were seated around the table. Directors, legal counsel, Wesley, Howard Kellerman, the CFO, 2 investor relations representatives who looked like they'd been up all night preparing for questions they couldn't anticipate. I took a seat in the middle of the table, not at the head where Raymond would sit, not at the far end where guests usually got positioned. Somewhere in the middle where I could watch everyone's face when the situation shifted, because it was going to shift. The only question was how quickly they'd recognize it. Raymond entered at exactly 0800, which I respected. Punctuality matters in business just like it matters in the military. He took his position at the head of the table, shoulders back, voice steady and confident. He opened with his standard presentation about historic partnerships and strategic growth opportunities. He talked about Beckworth Industries entering a new phase of expansion, about the confidence Thornfield's investment represented, about the exciting future they were building together. You could tell he'd delivered this exact presentation many times before because nothing he said required him to think while saying it. Every word was calculated, every pause was practiced, every gesture was designed for maximum effect. He was performing for the cameras, playing the role of the visionary CEO closing the biggest deal in his company's history. I let him finish his first slide, let him establish his rhythm and get comfortable with his message. Then I said the words that changed everything. We need to address what happened yesterday. The room didn't explode. That's not how these things work in corporate environments. Instead, it tightened. Like atmospheric pressure dropping before a storm system moves through. A couple of directors glanced at each other. One set down his pen and folded his hands. Howard Kellerman looked down at his folder like it might provide some kind of guidance. Raymond didn't look at me immediately. He adjusted his cufflinks, left hand over right, and delivered his first line of defense, a social misunderstanding, nothing more. I didn't respond right away. In the Marines, we learned that silence is often more powerful than words. Let the other person fill the quiet space. Let them show you exactly how much they understand about the situation they're in. Howard Kellerman spoke first, which surprised me. He was 3 seats to my left, and up until that moment, he'd been treating his folder like classified intelligence. Marshall, is this material to final contract execution? Careful word choice. Not does this matter, or is this important? Material. He was thinking like the CFO of a company about to receive $875 million, which meant he was already calculating exposure and liability. Wesley leaned forward before I could answer. Look, we're all adults here. Austin made a mistake. We can address it internally and move forward. Internally, I repeated. Like how you addressed it last night when you sent me a text message 9 hours after watching it happen. Wesley's face went completely neutral, which told me everything about his leadership style under pressure. When confronted with his own inaction, he defaulted to corporate speak and damage control rather than taking responsibility. Raymond tried to regain control of his boardroom. Gentlemen, we're not going to derail an $875 million partnership over office politics. Office politics, I said, and let those words hang in the air for a moment. Is that what we're calling it when your son pours bourbon on a Marine's dress uniform in front of 180 defense industry professionals? The room got very quiet. You could hear the air conditioning cycling on, the distant hum of traffic 32 floors below, the subtle electronic buzz of the cameras recording everything. Howard closed his folder completely and placed both hands flat on the table. A director near the end shifted in his chair. Wesley was looking down at his notes like they might provide an escape route. Curtis Manning, the lead independent director, opened his contract binder to a specific page. I knew which page because I'd written the language myself. He cleared his throat and read aloud. Section 12.7, Conduct Unbecoming. Any behavior by company leadership or immediate family members that materially impacts operational integrity, professional standing, or stakeholder confidence may trigger immediate withdrawal of committed capital. No intent requirement specified. No cure period provided. He paused, then looked directly at Raymond. This clause was revised at Thornfield's specific request. We negotiated it for 3 weeks. That one statement did more damage to Raymond's position than anything I could have said. It told everyone in the room that Section 12.7 wasn't boilerplate legal language. It was specific. It was intentional. It was put there by me for exactly this kind of situation. And Howard Kellerman, who had fought against including it, knew exactly why it existed. Several heads turned toward me. I didn't clarify, didn't elaborate, didn't confirm. I just let Curtis's words settle while I watched Raymond calculate his next move. He tried minimization first. We're talking about a social event, after hours. Austin wasn't acting in any official capacity. He was wearing a Beckworth Industries credential. Curtis said calmly, "Your wife was 10 feet away when it happened. You have 180 witnesses, including 3 retired Marine generals and the Deputy Secretary of Defense's Chief of Staff." Wesley finally spoke up. "What exactly are you looking for here, Marshal? An apology? Austin can apologize." "An apology," I said. "From Austin." "Yes, for conduct unbecoming, if that's what you want to call it." I looked around the table. At Howard, who was staring at his hands. At the directors, who were glancing at each other like passengers on a turbulent flight. At Wesley, who thought he could negotiate his way out of a situation he should have prevented in the first place. "Here's what I want you to understand," I said. "Austin didn't disrespect a guest at your conference yesterday. He field-tested a covenant. He wanted to see what would happen if he publicly humiliated someone he assumed had no leverage. Your wife wanted to see what would happen if she ignored it completely. Wesley wanted to see what would happen if he stayed silent for 9 hours and then sent a text message." I placed my phone face up on the conference table, not as a threat, as documentation. "You all got your answer." Raymond straightened up in his chair. "Marshal, let's step outside. The 2 of us. We can work this out without making it a public spectacle." "It's already public," I said. "This feed has been running for 20 minutes. Your investor relations team is watching, your legal department is watching, your board of directors is watching." For the first time since I'd known him, Raymond Beckworth looked genuinely rattled. Not angry, not defensive, but rattled. Like a man who had spent 22 years being the most powerful person in every room and was suddenly realizing this room operated by different rules. "Then we address it on camera," he said, recovering his composure. "We acknowledge a miscommunication occurred. We commit to reviewing our protocols. We move forward like the professionals we are." "Miscommunication," I repeated. "Professional protocols." "Yes." I picked up my phone. "Noah, are you monitoring this feed?" "Affirmative," came the voice of my general counsel through the speaker. "Standing by. Execute Section 12.7. I said it the same way I'd order coffee. No drama, no raised voice, just 3 words that meant something very specific to the person on the other end of the line. "Formal notice being prepared," Noah responded immediately. "Immediate suspension of capital commitment effective now. Full withdrawal documentation to follow within 1 hour." "Copy that," I said, and ended the call. For about 10 seconds, nobody moved. The room held its breath like a patient waiting for test results. Then Howard's phone buzzed against the table. One short vibration. He looked at the screen and his expression went completely blank. Raymond was watching Howard's reaction. "That's procedural," he said quickly, "temporary. We can address this through proper channels." Howard's phone buzzed again, longer this time. He flipped it over, read the message, and set it back down without saying a word. But I saw what it said. "Withdrawal notice filed. All transfers suspended." That's when other phones started going. Not all at once, but like dominoes falling. 1 buzz, then 3. Then most people at the table had something lighting up or vibrating. Assistants texting, legal calling, investor relations getting questions they had no answers for yet. On the wall-mounted screen behind Raymond, someone in the AV booth had switched from his presentation to a market ticker. Pre-market trading indicators for Beckworth Industries, down 6%, pause, down 9%, down 11%. Nobody reached for the remote to change it back. Raymond looked at the screen showing his company's stock price dropping in real time, then at the room full of people whose phones were lighting up with crisis communications, then directly at me. "You're not going to collapse a $3 billion company over a social incident," he said, still confident, still certain this was some kind of negotiating tactic he could counter. "I'm not collapsing anything," I said. "I'm pulling an unfunded commitment based on a leadership assessment. What happens to your stock price is the market deciding what they think about governance at Beckworth Industries." Curtis spoke before Raymond could respond. "The withdrawal notice has been executed. That's not a negotiating position, that's a completed legal action." He turned to the board counsel at the end of the table. "We need to discuss fiduciary exposure immediately," Raymond turned on him. "Curtis, we are not having that conversation right now. We're already having it." Curtis replied. He wasn't raising his voice. "When you've sat on 15 corporate boards over 25 years, you don't need to raise your voice to command attention." Wesley had gone completely silent. He was staring at the ticker on the wall, down 13% now. His appointment as incoming CEO was contingent on successfully closing the Thornfield deal. No deal meant no transition. No transition meant he was sitting in a boardroom watching his career prospects dissolve while he did exactly what he'd done at the conference. Nothing. The market opened at 0930 by 0945. It was no longer speculation. I watched the aftermath from a conference room 2 floors down that Howard had quietly offered me after the board session ended. No explanation, just opened the door and said the space was available if I needed it. I think he wanted me out of the main building before the real panic started. By 10:30, Beckworth's stock had settled at down 13%. Not a collapse, a repricing. The market quietly adjusting everything it thought it understood about the company's leadership and future prospects. Credit agencies flagged review status before lunch. 2 institutional partners paused secondary commitments pending governance clarification. The Pentagon scheduled a contracting review for next quarter. The ripple effects weren't loud. They were just measurable. On every screen that tracked this kind of information, Beckworth Industries was being systematically reevaluated. Around 1400, someone knocked on the conference room door. I wrapped up my call and said, "Come in." Samantha Beckworth walked in. Raymond's niece, 24 years old, worked in communications. She'd been at the conference the day before, standing near the registration table when Austin made his demonstration. I'd noticed her because she was one of the few people who hadn't laughed. She came in and stood near the door, not sitting down. "I wanted to say something before you left," she said. I waited. "What Austin did was wrong. What my aunt did. Not saying anything that was wrong too." She paused. "I know that doesn't change anything. I just didn't want you to leave thinking everyone in this family thought that behavior was acceptable." I looked at her for a moment. She wasn't reading from a script. She wasn't doing damage control. She was just a 24-year-old who had watched something happen and didn't want to be counted among the people who said nothing. "Thank you," I said. "That matters." She nodded and left. In 25 years of business, that was maybe the 3rd time someone from the other side of a deal had done something like that. It stays with you. Not because it changes the structural outcome. It doesn't. But because it reminds you that the problem is usually concentrated at the top. The people below are often just trying to figure out how to survive the culture the people above them created. 3 weeks later, Raymond asked to meet. No cameras, no board members, no lawyers. Just a conference room in a building he no longer technically controlled, overlooking the Potomac River. He was sitting when I arrived, not at the head of the table. Either someone had suggested he sit elsewhere or he'd figured it out himself. "You could have warned me," he said. "I did," I replied. "When your son poured bourbon on my uniform and you called it a misunderstanding on live television." He was quiet for a moment. A Coast Guard cutter moved slowly down the river. We both watched it navigate the channel. "I built that company for 22 years, he said. "Regional logistics to $3 billion in defense contracts. That's not nothing." "No," I said, "it's not. And it's still standing. I didn't destroy Beckworth Industries. I pulled funding that hadn't been dispersed yet. What happened to your stock was the market pricing what they saw on that boardroom feed." He looked at me. "Is there a path back for the capital?" "Not under your chairmanship." He nodded slowly like he'd expected that answer but needed to hear it confirmed. "What was the point of this meeting?" I asked. "I thought you deserved a conversation that wasn't in front of cameras or subject to board votes." We both stood at the same time. No handshake, no animosity. Just the end of something that had run its course. 6 months later, I read in Defense Weekly that Wesley Garrison had been passed over for CEO. The board brought in an external candidate with 30 years of military contracting experience. Austin Beckworth quietly left the company to pursue other opportunities, which is corporate speak for being asked to find employment elsewhere. Raymond kept his pension and his consulting agreement, but his operational authority was transferred to the new leadership team. Thornfield Defense Solutions signed 3 new contracts within 90 days of withdrawing from Beckworth. Word travels fast in defense circles, especially when it involves someone standing up for military protocols in a business environment. Respect, it turns out, is still marketable. Here's what I want you to understand about that Bourbon incident, especially if you're a man who's worked long enough to know what real respect looks like. Austin Beckworth thought he was sorting out a vendor that day. He was actually testing the only person in that room who understood exactly what his father's company was worth and who had 24 years of experience reading leadership under pressure. The mistake wasn't the Bourbon. The mistake was assuming that authority comes from position rather than competence, that respect is given rather than earned, that some people don't matter because they're not wearing the right suit or carrying the right title. In any room, the most expensive assumption you can make is deciding who has power before you understand who's actually holding the contract. Age and experience aren't just numbers on a resume. They're force multipliers that entitled youth consistently underestimates. When someone disrespects the uniform, the service, or the man who wore both, they're not just making a social error. They're revealing exactly how they'll operate when they think nobody important is watching. And in business, just like in the Marines, somebody is always watching.